Hello, welcome to stream number 19 of the series where we're making an NES game from scratch. So let's just jump into it. I don't have a lot to really review last time. We had done a lot of work trying to make the asset tool export the project in a way that populated the sprites, sort of a more data-driven approach, but that was taking too many cycles, and we'd spent some time optimizing it. And we may revisit that approach at some point, but for now, it just seemed like it wasn't going to work. Just too many different things working against us, even though we had managed to get it somewhat optimized for compared to where we started out. It was just not going to work. So we reverted the code back in source control, and we're back to the point where we're generating the all the assets to write out code to populate the sprites. And the one other thing that I had done was I had mentioned that we have this problem of the PNG, the color arrangement is wrong. The background color that's transparent is not always the zero index color. So here I'll recreate this sprite to show it again. So what I did was I just implemented this simple, you can right click and swap colors, and what it actually does is it changes the palette so that the black color there is now the zero index, so it's going to be transparent, and then implemented the save so that we can save the sprite, and when we come back the colors have stayed swapped. So today I wanted to start working on building backgrounds and maps, because right now in the game, if we go back to it, it's just scrolling our title screen when I hit start, and that's because we're not updating the name table at all. We're just scrolling through it continuously, so whatever is in the name table stays there, and we don't have any tiles getting loaded to represent the background. I guess we could also mess with the palettes for sprites too. I'm kind of less worried about that, just because the tile stuff is going to be way more, I think, intensive, cycle-wise. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm doing this, as I've mentioned many times. This is my first NES game, so I'm learning as we do it. So we may find that I'm totally wrong about that, but we'll learn as we go. One thing I did want to show before we get into this is what I was thinking. So a while ago, I had built a tool, and this is going to be a little bit hard to see potentially, but this world builder tool, it was just a basic Windows application that I had created. I don't know, and you can tell by this dialog how old this is. I don't think I have any maps here, but I can create a new map, and this was for the Game Boy Advance, so it supports the different Game Boy background modes that were relevant for maps that you would create, and then it was using the fixed layout here, just because we didn't need anything more than that in what we were building. So if I just choose, this might actually even be an older version now that I'm looking at it, because I don't remember it working this way. I was under the impression that it used an arbitrary size when you created a new map, but that might be just me not remembering it. This was from a long time ago. Yeah, this is a more recent build because it's got that splash screen in the background is black. All right, so let's see. So if I create a new map here, yeah, okay. So the original version was kind of hard-coded to the fixed background modes that the Game Boy Advance supported. And later, I realized that that probably wasn't the best approach because, you know, I wanted to be able to make arbitrarily large maps with up to 4 separate layers. I wonder if this is going to load. Oh, yeah, so this loads. So here's an example of how this works. This is obviously not the most visually stunning map, but, you know, it works. So actually the other one was better. I think this is going to crash if there's a bug in this that for some reason I never fixed, where if you try to open more than one map in a session, it crashes. It was never important for what we were doing. So yeah, this one is a little bit more interesting. So this map here has some background stuff going on. And you can tell by the way that it's updating, it's not really drawing the most efficient way possible. This was, you know, something that I was kind of developing very quickly just to give us something to be able to draw maps. So it was not by any means an extremely efficient tool, but it you know, it was workable. And then you could turn off the different layers with keyboard shortcuts. So you know, you have the tile background with the pipes, and then the second layer on top of it was the walls, and then there was what was called the event mode, where you could set. You can see it's using transparency here to essentially block off areas where this was also for a shooter, believe it or not, and this was using these transparencies here to indicate where it was clear for the ship to fly and where it was a bounding box for collision. You can see that there are some problems with the way that this worked because, for example, this particular tile here, just because of the way that it fell on the grid, the collision was kind of crap, right? It probably would have been better to just have that be a non-colliding box, but anyway. So and then as you mouse over, it's telling you what the event value is. So by default, it's got non-walkable and then custom, and that was because this was originally developed for what's it called, an RPG that we were working on. And then each of these tile sets, for some reason that doesn't render here anymore. Something changed with Windows where that doesn't work anymore, but when you would click on this, it would show you your tile sets, and you can move forward and back to view the different tiles, or you could place the entire set on the map here in the different layers that you are working on. So I'm not going to build exactly the same thing, but certainly I'm going to work on this in a similar way because for all intents and purposes, it's just, you know, a simple tile editor. And, you know, just like we could have used some other tools to build some of this stuff, we could have used tiled for the NES side of things, but I want to incorporate everything into one tool that kind of does everything. I'm trying to think what else was in here that was kind of cool. You could define, so you could define also some other information about sprites. So you can import sprite tile sets, which I don't know that none of these are. But anyway, so this was, you know, again, this was done a long time ago, and this might, oh yeah, so this is an NPC control list. So all of this stuff is, you know, just standard Windows dialogues. Simple, effective. Probably could have used some optimization in the way it was drawing, which is why it's so damn slow. But we'll be sure to make that a little bit faster in the new asset tool. All right, so what I'm thinking we want to do is we want to probably have a button for creating new maps. So the NES only supports, if we go back to, let's go to NESDev. Well, I don't think we need to go to NESDev for this. Basically, the NES supports, you have the background name tables. Did I close that folder? I guess I did. Has the background name tables, and in those name tables, there are no layers like there are on the Game Boy Advance, which had 4. So this is basically it. This is what we're dealing with, and then the sprite can be either have the priority to be above the background or behind the background. So if the background is using a transparent color, it will be drawn above. So we might be able to take advantage of that to do some cool effects. For now, what I'd like to do is just a really basic background where we have, maybe just a simple series of like one color tiles that we draw in a pattern, and we load first a single screen, and then once we get the single screen loaded, we'll start dealing with the scrolling portion, because once we start the scrolling, we have to keep ahead of that scroll line here and keep loading tiles above it so that we're always moving up the map, right? So let's start with just do a real quick, come on. The only reason I'm doing this is so that we get approximately the right color. Now the other thing to keep in mind is that most NES games used what were called metatiles. They did not, I mean, I shouldn't generalize like that because I don't really know, but I know that a lot of them didn't use just 8x8 tile objects because the levels were pretty big, and in order to store and effectively load that much content into memory would have been inefficient because of the limits of space and the cartridge ROM size. So generally people are using 16 by 16 metatiles, and that takes advantage of the fact that you have the attributes being 16 by 16 as well, so that you deal with the palettes on the metatiles instead of if you do a excuse me. The only thing with doing a pre-stream run is that when it's cold outside, I get congested feeling. So anyway, sorry, as I was saying, so if you have a metatile that's 32 by 32, you have 4 16 by 16 tiles, and then, I mean, you could just say, okay, all of these are grouped together with one palette, and that simplifies things because then you don't have to deal with 4 individual palettes. But then if you do that, then you are limiting yourself in terms of the number of colors that you have available. Given that we really don't know what we're doing yet with, well, any of this, I think probably the best bet is to just use a 32 by 32 metatile, and then we can always go back to 16 by 16 if we find that it's too restrictive or not giving us the kind of visual style we want for the game. So let's do that. Let's say this is 32 by 32, and which is really super tiny on a high resolution monitor. And then let's just choose, I don't know, what color should we choose? Choose a good blue color, and then let's change this to indexed mode. And it looks like that's actually, is that really a color that there's a match for? Looks like it. Okay, so export that. give it the imaginative name of blue tile. Don't need to save that. So where's blue tile? Oh crap. I always do that. I always... The interface is so ambiguous there, and I know it says, you know, save, but just the way that it's set up, I always end up canceling out of actually exporting the PNG. There's just something about the way that that works that my brain automatically ignores the way that that is set up in the user interface. Poor usability, I would say. Or maybe I'm just... Oh, wait a minute. Did I save it? Oh, it's because I saved it in the wrong... Here I'm going on and on about their usability, and I'm just being stupid. Alright. There you are, blue tile. Let's go into the asset tool. Okay, bring those back up, and the asset tool, and it loaded blue tile. Okay, I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna rename it. I like that we implemented that it's watching the file system. It's kind of nice that that happens automatically. All right, so let's see why. That's interesting that it's not showing any. I obviously don't need that to be a sprite, but why are the colors not right? Is it... What happened? Okay. So what did I do wrong here? Mode. Oh, why is it still RGB? It should be indexed. Okay. Save. Oh, dog. So now we've actually got our blue color, and we don't want that to be the background color, otherwise it's going to be fully transparent. So what we'll do is we'll swap this color, which is just color 0, with this one, so that we've got our... Well, actually, for this, we don't want this to be a sprite. I was just, yeah, checking to make sure the colors are good. All right, let's we don't need that. So that's okay. What we need to do now is we need to create a metatile, right? So let's find where we're doing our buttons here for create sprite and stuff. Okay, so there's create sprite. Let's create a button called create metatile. And we're going to put this a little bit above create sprite. I think that'll be okay. All right, so blue tile. Yeah, that's okay. I kind of like that it's a little bit separated from the project, and it's got decent spacing compared to the sprite button, or next to the sprite button. So I'm good with that. So we want to create a metatile from that, and a metatile so what is the structure of the metatile going to be? I mean, we know the width is fixed. I probably want to just put something in there to wondering if I want to put something in there just in case we do switch to 16 by 16 and we want to make sure that we don't accidentally try and use a 32 by 32 metatile in something we do later on. So maybe I'll add a... We'll just add an unsigned int here for it. Metatile type, maybe. We can't call it. Why am I using a Y? Metatile type. Nah, it's not a good name for it. What do I want to do here? Besides just have something that differentiates it. Maybe call it metatile version. Okay. Alright, so we got the version. Realistically, at that point, all we need is the palette and the image content, right? So palette, and then, and similar with the sprite, we're not going to be doing anything where we actually store that. We're going to, I'm going to put my phone down. It keeps lighting up and distracting me. We got a version, our palette, and our image. We're not going to store the image in an array here, although we could, because it's a fixed size versus an image. If it's a 32 by 32, yeah, maybe let's do that and make our lives a little bit easier, right? Because it'll be a simpler thing to read it and store. So const int metatile, we'll do it like this, metatile image size equals what's 32 by 32? I should have known that, right? Could have done the binary shift to figure that out. All right, so that's really it. That's we have our palette, we have our image, and we're not up to the point where we're dealing with the map yet. So, all right. One thing I realized when we were doing this stuff was that, you know, for the sprite, I did a load, save, and a create, and realistically could have probably just gone with load and save, but not terribly important to fix that right now since they are, I think, sharing some code. But let's do that with the metatile stuff. So we have our metatile. Am I being inconsistent with how I'm saving the names here? I don't know which I like better. Capital T, lowercase t. We'll go with lowercase t. So save metatile, and then right, we've got our file name that we're going to save it out to. So all of this is going to be very similar to what we're already doing with so much of this other code. We need our file handle. We need a temp file name because we got to replace the extension. Well, let's just assume that the file name coming in is good, so we don't have to do any weird nonsense in here with this one. And then actually all of this is the same. We're just going to clobber the file, right? And then if file is greater than or equal to 0, because the metatile is all fixed and pretty straightforward, we just say write file. metatile, size of metatile, and close file, and we're done. So that's surprisingly easy. I mean, it should have been, so that's good. Let's, I guess, well, okay. Ignore that. Load metatile. So here we're just going to do the reverse. We do read only with O binary. And we're not going to lock the file because we don't care if somebody else is dealing with this while we're trying to deal with it. It's not a big deal. And we don't want to lock it either. We just do the reverse. We do a read into metatile. Okay. That is pretty easy. That's a straightforward process because, like I said, with this image, we're just using a fixed buffer, so we don't have to worry about using a, doing what we're doing with the sprite, where the image is, referenced by pointer, and then we want to clear out the pointer and store the data separately after the main structure is stored. So that's that. Now, what we want to do is create metatile should do something like, let's see. And create a metatile right here just to keep it easy. If we're going to create the metatile here, what we want to do is we want to say just say version is 0. Palette is, we'll do a mem copy of the palette to there. The source is just palette. And the size is size of char times palette size. I actually want to rename this to current palette just to keep it consistent with the other things we're kind of using. And this can be current image. Okay. So we've got current palette, and palette is getting copied into that, and then we want to iterate through our current image and copy the data. Actually, what we should probably do first before we do any of this is check if if current image width doesn't equal 32, or current image height doesn't equal 32. We should probably do something here, and then we don't have message boxes or alert boxes or anything in our GUI, so maybe we would want to do something like, although that brings up an interesting, how would you do something like that? Would have to be, may not be able to do that. Or with the way things are currently set up, you'd basically be setting a variable to to display the alert box, right? Because right now, the way this is all working, we're traversing these instructions to create the different parts of the GUI as we go through. And that would be no different with the alert box. Not sure how we would do that, but for now, let's do just a printf. The image is not 32 by 32. We'll come back to that. Okay. The easiest thing might be for this to just create a hook to use the Windows default message box, just for the sake of expediency with that, since building a dialog box system with modal and non-modal dialog boxes is probably not going to be super helpful. So, or interesting. All right, we have that. So now we just need to iterate over the image. Int I is equal to 0 and less than 1024, because that's how many pixels are in it. What did I say that was? Metatile image size. I want to use that because if we change it, that's obviously going to be a problem. Probably want to define that as well, just for the sake of, again, if we change it, this stuff up here, so it's all together. We probably want to start moving those structs into something, into some other file, and along with these other functions, but we'll get to that later. So we're just going to iterate through the indexed image at this point and put that into the current metatile. So current metatile dot image I is equal to image current image indexed I, and that's it. That's pretty much all we have to do. Save the metatile. That's current metatile and temp file name. Do we have, what's temp num? What is that? It's not even hours. I don't know what that is. Okay. So what I want to do for that is we want to have a temp name max file folder name, zero that out. String, what is it? S string copy. No, string copy S. Temp name max file folder name. The source is going to be current file list selected image index. Full path, because we want it to save in the same directory. Truncate. Okay, and then replace file extension of temp name with metatile. Was it underscore string copy? Yes. What is your deal? It's so funny. It's like when you're not, when you don't do this over the weekend, I feel like I forget simple things. I don't program it in C or C++ at work anymore, which I kind of miss, especially with the stuff that I do primarily. Although C# is okay, you know, for that kind of thing, for work. Certainly preferred over some of the other stuff I have to use. All right, so let's see. So if I do something like this, this should fail to export because it's not 32 by 32. And then this should export and create a... Okay, cool. So that's good. The only thing that's wrong is that we're not filtering for that type anymore at the moment. So we're going to add that to our file filter here. All right, let's see. Okay, good. So that's getting created now. So let's do this. We have our metatile being created. Let's take a look and see what the data actually looks like. Make sure that it's doing the right thing. So if we open up the file, here's a metatile. So the first 4 bytes are going to be the version number, and then the palette, which is 1000. Is that right? Is 1 the color we want? Yeah, okay. That could very well be. That's close enough. I'll take it. We still haven't unified our palettes here. I'll have to do that for the next stream because it's somewhat annoying. And then the rest of our data is the indexed value, and that, yeah, that's right. That's all going to be it's all going to be 0 because right now it's color 0. So what we'll need to do is same thing we're doing for when we draw the sprites. We need to be able to update the metatile with the new re-indexed palette when we swap around the colors. So let's do this. We have one called sprite selected. I know we have one that says that's image selected. Let's move this to here just so these are all kind of the related things are all together. Okay, so we want to do one called metatile selected equals false, and we can do a similar lookup here where we can say is metatile this is just for the sake of keeping things a little bit organized, that I'm adding these helper functions, which are essentially calling these other functions. So, okay. Name. All right, so if that is the case, then metatile selected equals true, image selected. That's going to be false no matter what anyway, so metatile selected equals false. Just initialize that properly. All right, so we have no current image, so what we need to do is load metatile, so current metatile and current file list I full. Probably want to do the full path here too, just in case something weird is going on, and it's somehow not able to find it without the full path. Better to be more specific in this case. Okay, so then current image equals metatile to image current metatile, and then image changed is true because we need to refresh that. So here we're going to say metatile to image metatile pointer, and we're going to create bitmap here, which is always going to be 32 by 32, or, wow, metatile image, max dimension. That's what it should be, max dimension. Okay, so we've got our image there, and then we just want to, yeah, so we want to pretty much do the same thing that the sprite stuff is doing, but for a fixed length. So metatile image size plus I, right, and then image pix I is equal to GUI NES palette metatile image I. So again, we're just oh, actually, this should be metatile palette image, right? Because we're taking the image. The same thing as with the sprite. We're taking the image value, putting it into the terms of what the palette represents for that color, and then looking up the actual RGB value, and then we're also populating the indexed value because we use that later on. So that's that, and then we want to return our image, and the only thing I forgot to do here is if current image tiger free current image, and then yeah, okay, good. So I should probably do the null like I'm doing up there. Could even make that an inline thing if I'm really going to be right. I could do something like this. Free image tiger. Just say tiger free image equals null, right? Inline. Say if image and image. So check to see if the pointer we get is valid, and if the point value that the image pointer is actually pointing to is a non-null. And then we can just do, what did I call this? Free image, current image. Same thing here. Okay. So that's good. So that should have loaded the metatile into memory, and then we don't have anything for actually drawing anything when the metatile is selected. Probably want to make this an else if, because you're not going to have an image and a sprite. So same thing here, if metatile selected and current image. So make sure that that's all valid. If GUI palette view, we may be able to simplify some of this here because we're doing a lot of the same things. Current metatile. So same thing here, right? We're saying if the palette is returning that we did a right click to swap the index, then we just want to reorganize everything here. So I is less than metatile image size and then if current metatile image I equals swapped index current metatile. So again, this is totally the same as what we're doing for the sprite. Could probably do some simple work here to make this work more efficiently. Interesting. So I actually want to do something like this. I forgot about the fact that we did this. Current image, current metatile. So if we go back to our metatile to image, what are we using this for? I wonder if it's better to just do... I'm okay with that. That's fine. We're going to just ultimately call... This is the same basic format as we're doing this other stuff here. So draw metatile. We're taking the image, the metatile pointer. We're looping through now. So draw metatile. And the only reason we did that is because I want to be able to reuse this later on when we do the reindexing. So draw metatile, right? Because we changed the palette, we did the swap of the image. We need to then redraw the metatile onto the image, which is going to be the same size. There's no point in reallocating the content. And then we do need to add a button to save the metatile. We put that in the same spot as with the sprite, where we're saving, allowing you to save the sprite. So just do this in the same location, obviously different code. If GUI button blah blah blah, save metatile, and then save metatile, current metatile, and file list selected, image index, full path, because it's going to be the thing selected in our list on the left. And that should be it. That should be it for the metatile load and save if I don't have bugs. What's the problem? I is 0, image, right violation, indexed is that, where's my call stack? Metatile to image, why? Oh, is it not? Did I forget it's not? Oh, it doesn't allocate the index. You know, I should probably add that to... The only reason I'm not doing the allocation of the bytes for the index is because it's really not part of anything Tiger is supposed to be doing, but at the same point, it's like I've gone to the trouble of modifying it. It's kind of stupid that I'm not just modifying its allocation routine similarly. Could probably change that, and then I'll stop making that mistake, right? All right, so okay, we're not drawing the palette. The image is not getting drawn. Oh yeah, because we didn't. we didn't finish. I mean, we got some of the stuff that we needed to go in the way we wanted, but I'm wondering if we can just probably share some of these things. Right, so like drawing the image, that's going to be shared regardless of what we're drawing. So it's like if image selected or metatile selected or sprite selected, and we're using the same image, so there's no reason it has to be done separately. Right, so that drawing is, I think, the same. Let's just verify that. Yep. So that's good. So that eliminates the need for that being in every single part of what we do here. The GUI palette view, we do want that to be different. The bounding box is only relevant for sprites, but now that we've moved the image drawing down, we need to do that afterwards. So if sprite selected, oh, actually we have, let's check for the button here so we can do that. Makes me feel a little bit better about the fact that we're drawing the button there. Okay, so we have the palette view. Anything else that we need to draw? The color selector is here now. So let's see. So I do a PNG. We've got that. That's good. All right, that's cool. So that is actually, that's pretty good. We've got save metatile showing up now. Save sprite is showing up. So if I do a swap, now this color has changed. If I save the metatile, nothing crashed, so that's good. And if I open the metatile, okay, cool. So this is our version. This is the palette, the 4 bytes of the palette. And then you can see before it was all zeros because we were using the 0 index color. Now we're using the 1 index color. So yeah, so we've got that's saved for our metatile. So that's good. So now we get into how we're going to deal with maps. I probably want to make this allow for anchoring because I want it to stay on the bottom just like the color selector is. So let's do that. So palette view. Oh, actually, palette. Oh, right. That has to be. Yeah, never mind. That is different depending on what we're looking at because the palette view is triggering different actions. So let's add anchoring to that now. So GUI anchor bottom and GUI anchor left. So and then where's that other one? Let me go to anchor style. Give it default so that we don't have to worry about it requiring an anchor if we don't need it. Okay. So now, what was I doing? I don't remember how I did the color selector anchoring. I think I just recalculated if it's set. Yeah. I actually don't think I need the left anchor, technically. So let's see. So it's using, right. Okay, so it calculates the delta and stores that. Node anchor data delta y equals main window height minus y. Is that right? I'm just calculating the difference between the height of the window and the y offset. Yes. Okay. It's a pointer, not a... Okay. So we've got that, and then basically if anchor style end anchor bottom. So if that bit is set, then we're going to say every time the node's y is equal to main window dot y minus node anchor data delta y. Right? That's what I did. I know there's a typo. Oh, not y, height, and it should be an arrow. And there's a bug in the way that this works because it's assuming a fixed window size when it starts, and I gotta fix that. Not super critical to what we're doing at the moment. So that's not working. Why are you no work? Node y. I thought it was just right. If it's the anchor style, main window height minus anchor data delta y. It's just using the y value that's passed in to calculate the delta y. And then when it renders the palette view, it's using the y. What gives? I assume that it's actually coming in here. It is. Okay. So, like I was saying, there is a definite bug with the way that some of this is calculated, and I understand how it's working that way. It's related to the initial size of the window. It's pretty simple to fix. It's just not kind of been at the top of my list of priorities. So that is strange because it should be updating the node with my new y value. What's your deal? Oh, well, no. Color selector is that, and that is working. Should be palette size. That is bizarre. Let's see what the values are coming into this. Excuse me. Oh, okay, because that's defining another file. Let me. Just add a reminder for that one. So if I go to this, we have our node y is at 550. The height of the window is 956. The delta y is 406. Did I calculate that delta correctly? Yeah. So the y is 550 there. It stays at 550. So if I expand the height of the window, it should... Whoa, why did that not move? Oh, it did. Oh, it's... What? Is it because... That's strange. Oh, is it only with some of these it's not working? Or is it the... Was it the PNG one is not using the anchor? Maybe that's why. Oh. Okay. I thought that seemed weird. It seemed like it should have been working, and I... Where is the... Okay, that's why. So, swapped index is null, because we don't care. And then GUI, anchor, bottom. Alright. So now when we move this, we should be... That's good, and that is moving... Yeah, okay. I mean, it's not... Certainly not the most beautiful user interface. But the main thing is that if we expand it out like this to work on something larger, we will actually be able to do that. Now we probably... Well, so that gets into now my thing about the size being off on initialization. And I'm wondering what the best way to handle that is. Probably what we should do is the same thing we're doing with the buttons, which is we're setting the initial X and Y value based on a delta from whatever we're trying to anchor to. So we don't care about the top. Sorry, the left and right, but we do care about this. So we say something like main window. Oh, it's GUI main window. Minus, I don't know, 100? Dummy. And that was for what? That was for a sprite. So if I select the sprite, I think it's just being, it's too close to the edge, and this is drawing over it. So let's say minus 200. That's not going to update it, I don't think, because the initial size is set when the application is first initialized. So yeah, all right, we're gonna, let's see if that works better. Okay, so yeah, so that's down there now, which is basically what I wanted. And then the selector palette should be below that, so we'll do a similar thing where we have that down here, right? Yep, so similarly, I want to do GUI main window minus height, minus, and then what were we subtracting here? 200, we'll do 100. This definitely leaves a lot to be desired in terms of how this is all being handled. I have to kind of rethink some of this stuff because excuse me, it's obviously not ideal to be having to reference it this way to make it work the way we want. That's much better. That's where we want it to be. But I'm not sure what the right approach would be offhand. But okay, so that's good. That's what I wanted it to look like, regardless of how we got it there to start off with. Because if we're going to be working on large maps, we need to have the full screen available. So what we need to do is we need to change the other places where we have the palettes being drawn so that we can make sure that they're going to initialize the palette correctly in the same way. So that's the palette view that we didn't change. We're going to change it to, where's the palette view here? It was just for the sprite one that I changed. Yep. So get this. Okay. Cool. So all of these should be working in the same way now. And they are. Okay, good. And then if we resize it, short of it just sometimes getting too small for these buttons, we can fix that with some sort of like min width or min height type thing, but that's all working the way I wanted to. Okay, cool. So we've got our metatile. And then, all right, so now we need to be able to create a map. So where would we... So right now all the buttons we've been creating have been linked to the asset that you have selected here. So if you select a PNG, it gives you the option to create a metatile or a sprite. The ability to export the project is always there. I mean, I guess we could do it directly above export project. We could have, you know, new map or something like that. Although I'm not sure if I'm crazy about that idea. I mean, we'll just put it there for now, and the only thing it's going to do is we're going to have issues with these buttons because they're too low now. So for save sprite and save metatile, we got to bump them up a little bit. There it is. So let's say minus 100 to offset it a little bit more. Yeah, that looks good. And then we'll add a button. So where we have the export project button, we will add another one. Let's see. So I'm just basically putting this above create map. Anchor right and anchor bottom. Let's see how that looks. It's going to be a little bit too high, I think. Oh, that's actually not bad. Okay. So now we need to add map files to our file filter. And trying to think what's the best way to we'll probably just initialize the map to empty. We need to have some sort of ability to define the dimensions of the map too. I mean, one thing we haven't really worked on or decided on, or I haven't decided on, is whether we're going to allow scrolling back and forth. I feel like that would be cool because it would add some, it would make the game feel a little bit bigger, allowing that scrolling. But at the same point, obviously that adds complexity to the code that needs to be written, because now instead of just doing simple updates to where is it, the name table here, right, where we're horizontally mirroring, we're going to have to allow for scrolling left and right, and then that will cause artifacts if we're only using the horizontal mirroring. Now we could use forescreen. So we've talked about this a little bit, but so the this is actually not totally inaccurate. The name table layouts right now allow for with the mapper we're using, there are two full screens worth of name table information, and then it's either horizontally or vertically mirrored to two more. Now, if we switched to another mapper, we could actually have 4 full screens, allowing us to actually have this whole thing filled up with discrete or different data instead of having this mirroring. I'm not doing this mirroring, that's just naturally happening because of the way that the mirroring is set up. If I switch to, I was reversing that. Sorry. So this is horizontal mapping, mirroring, sorry, where it's flipping it over on the, or not flipping it over, but mirroring on the horizon, along the horizon versus vertical. We're using vertical mirroring. I always confuse this. But anyway, we could do forescreen, in which case, like I said, we'd end up with 4 discrete screens worth of data that we could display. But then we have to go to a different mapper that would support that. And the other thing about it is, like, we haven't really figured out what mapper we want to use. So we might want to use something like MMC3, which is popular because it allows you to do interrupts on each scan line. So way back in the beginning when we talked about how we did the scan lines and how the screen is redrawn, one of the things that we talked about was at the end of the memory range, there were the 3 interrupt vectors, right? If we go back to the assembler code, we define v-blank, reset, and then nothing right now. And that nothing was actually for this 3rd interrupt vector, and this is for IRQ, or interrupt request. And so using the MMC3 mapper, you can request that for every line that's drawn. So if this is one screen, at the end of every line that's drawn, your routine gets called. Now, obviously, that has to be a pretty efficient, tiny little routine if you want to do anything. If you want to use that timing for anything, and the reason people use that is for things like timing their code or doing really cool like parallax effects. So if you've ever seen an NES game where you've got what looks like 3 layers of different graphics that are moving, right, at 3 different speeds, that's generally, my understanding is it's an MMC3 mapper that's using the IRQ. I'm pretty sure some people also use it for when you have a game like, let's say, Super Mario Brothers, where you have, although to be clear, Super Mario Brothers does not actually do this, but in Super Mario Brothers, where it has the information at the top of the screen here, and then this is where Mario is running around, you could do that too. You could count how many scan lines you get down before swapping over to the game. Mario actually uses a different technique. They use what's called the sprite 0 hit, where instead of using sprite 0 for anything in the game, you place sprite 0 at the location that you want to split the screen, or basically check to see. You can use it to check where the scan line is, and when the scan line hits that sprite, you'll be able to check that and then do, whatever effect you want to do. In the case of Mario Brothers, it's splitting the screen so that you have the HUD, the information about your time and coins and lives and score, and then you have the actual game play here with Mario running around and doing his thing. Anyway, so I feel like that's pretty relevant to how we want to do things, because if we don't want to use 4 screens, I don't know that we want to use horizontal and vertical scrolling at the same time. I mean, it's certainly worth exploring. It's a more challenging thing to do. It also results in some weird artifacts. So if you've ever played Super Mario Brothers 3, along the edge you see discoloration of tiles as you move through the world, and that comes from the fact that it's not using 4-screen mirroring, and so it can't put the tiles with the attributes that they need ahead of time as you're scrolling in every direction, and you end up with those odd color artifacts as you scroll, most of which aren't really that visible on an old CRT TV, but on new TVs and emulators and screens that don't have the same viewable limitations in terms of viewable area. Because like they're on old CRT TVs, even though there was a fixed resolution, really you had a smaller area to work with, because not every TV displayed the entire resolution. What is that called? There's a specific name for it. It's worth looking up, because I can't remember. CRT TV visible area. So there's overscan, but I'm pretty sure it's just it's just the viewable area. I guess it's just the viewable area. So yeah, the 4x3 safe area. That's what it was that I was thinking about. I mean, it's the same thing as viewable area, but the safe area was the area where you knew for sure it was going to show up on someone's TV, where these other areas, technically they're part of the spec that you can use, but it was questionable as to whether or not the TV would actually display them because of the way that they were built, and that's why you get games now where whatever it was 30 years ago, I guess you were playing it. If you played it back then, you never noticed some of these things because the TVs basically hid them. In some cases, some games have like stuff going on the bottom that's like some weird effect of the way that they're dealing with. I think they're storing data in there, if I remember right, and you're basically seeing that because previously that was clipped by the TV. So all of that is to say, we probably, I got to think about what I want to do for the maps, because for the shooter, it's less critical that we do scrolling in horizontal and vertical directions, but eventually I want to be able to support that because it's going to be critical to the gameplay. And then the way that it's handled, I guess, will depend on the mapper that we have. So I got to do a little bit of research, I think, because I think I want to support the scrolling in both directions, but I got to research how that's done in MMC3 and other mappers that are using just the horizontal and vertical mirroring versus the 4-screen. And the 4-screen is really the question, because I'm not clear on how you would use that. The horizontal and vertical is pretty straightforward because you just have your array of memory that you're writing your tiles to, and then from there, once you're done, and it's mirroring, and so you scroll around and you update the relevant spots with the tile data. So I guess we need to be able to create the map with a specific size, but we don't have the GUI control to do that. I'm wondering if I'm gonna how do I want to do this? Well, I think what we probably want to do... Sorry, we're getting to a point where, you know, we're really starting to get closer and closer to integrating more and more stuff into the game, and you know, we really do have to think about the technical limitations of what it is we're building for the NES. I think what I'll do for tonight right now is I'm just going to work on exporting the metatile as a char-rom block file, and then exporting that as part of the project. And then once we're there, what I'll do is I think I'll work on the tool a little bit to give us some of the user interface stuff that we need for getting information about like the size of the map that we want to make. So the idea would be, if we run this here, when you click on create map, I think what it'll do is it'll just create, and before it actually, can I do this? I think I can do what I want to do here. Did I hit the right key? I didn't hit the right key. Print screen doesn't work? Or is it just not working mischief? Let's see. Looks like Photoshop. Okay. So if we zoom out for a second here. So what I'm thinking is that when we click on create map down there on the bottom of the screen, we'll open up essentially sort of like a floating, where's my pointer? There it is. We'll open up a floating sort of why is this a paintbrush and not, I do not like Photoshop. Graphics and web. And all these modes just hide tools, and I get it, like some people don't need this, but it's just frustrating. Anyway, sorry. So we'll just, you know, put a window here, I think, and it'll have, you know, probably it'll have something like, man, this is really slow. Oh, forget it. It's not even worth struggling through this with freaking Photoshop. We'll just have a window that I create where it'll ask for the width, the height. Probably it needs to know the mapper that we're well, it probably shouldn't need to know the mapper for the map itself, but it's definitely going to need to know the width and the height in terms of overall width and height of the map, possibly some other stuff here, and then, you know, an actual create button, and then cancel, something like that. All right, so we don't have anything like this. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. I'll work on that in the tool separately, because again, with like a lot of these GUI entities, it's probably not relevant for you to see exactly how that works. I don't know that anybody else is going to build it like this. I'm just doing this because it's, I don't know, I think it's kind of cool and fun. So let's work on getting this data exported. So I know we had something where we were exporting some character data out. So what was the call we were doing for that? If it's a sprite, get the file name, blah, blah, blah. Where were we doing this? We were doing sprite to image and then exporting. Okay, cool. So this takes any image and exports it. That's good. That's what we wanted to do. Now, what we want to do in here is probably want to create a new file for our including our metatile data into the char ROM. So let's call this metatiles. So we're going to include that and write that. Right, so then so this is essentially the same thing we've been doing for the other items, where we just loop through all of the items that we have in our list of files, and if it's a meta tile, then we're going to export it. And as I've said in previous streams where we were working on this, this is not exactly the most efficient way of doing this, just because I know that we can probably store off the metatiles and sprites and stuff into discrete lists that aren't part of the entire list of files that are detected by the tool when it opens up initially, but that's okay for what we're doing here. The performance in this particular operation is probably not as critical as in some other places. So include file header. So that's just our little header that it was automatically generated by the NES Asset tool. And then I want to do I want to give it a separate scope? I don't think it needs a separate scope. I think we just need to generate the appropriate include label. Or do we even need to do that? Because we're putting into the char ROM, I mean, depending on how we're doing things with the mappers, we may or may not need to ever access this. It may just be loaded into the char ROM for the game. Let's just export these as, let's see. Let's just export this as a series of ink bins that will load the char files. We can include that at the end of our code that loads. So in the assembler right now we have our chars and we have the main shooter char include file, which right now is actually only handling sprites. Where is that? Right. Oh, it's the entity char. Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. So what we can do in here is say include metatile char .inc. So we'll call metatile char just to keep it consistent with the entity char. And then the big difference is that the entity char is in fact, or maybe it isn't. I don't remember. It's been a while since I looked at that. Excuse me. Yeah, so that's just doing ink bins. Okay, good. That's what I thought. So so we're just doing ink bin, and then we're going to include. I don't need that. And we want to string in copy s to temp 100, and this is current file list I full path, truncate, and then we want to replace file extension of temp with char, right? So that's that, and then export char, and this is going to take, so what we need to do is we need to get the actual image and then export it. So what are we doing here? Are we generating a new image? We are, and then, oh, we're not freeing that. That's no good. All right, after we export it, then we should free image, export image, right? Because we don't need that anywhere else. Yep, so let's do the same thing here. Tiger image, or just tiger actually, image, export image equals tile set metatile to image. There it is. We need to load it first. So load metatile, metatile exported metatile equals 0. Current file list I full path. Oh, I reversed the operation, or the parameters rather. Exported meta tile. Alright, so we've got that. Why is this complaining? It's pointer exported meta tile is undefined because I can't spell. Can't spell. Okay, so we have that, and then we want to get the image from that. So exported meta tile, and then we want to export that image. We got to give it the appropriate name, which is temp, and then free image, exported image, and then we've got our ink bin that it's generating. What are you complaining about? Metatile? Oh, because that should be a pointer. Exported image or export image. Fine. Oops. Okay, so that should now, when we export the metatile. If I just hit export project, we crash. Why? Load is failing. Error reading. Where's my call stack? Main full path. Current file list. Oh, why am I using I for that? Oh, well, yeah, no, that's right. Current file list I is meta. Okay. What's the deal with that? So I is, whoa, why is I that big? I should be 0 here. And I is 0. I is less than current item count plus I. It's the first time we're going into it. I must be getting tired of him making these kinds of fun mistakes. I'm not defining, is it, that's in the selected, so that's not going to be, that's not going to do it. Where, what the hell? Oh, shut up. I know it's wrong. Export project. Okay. Current item, I is 0. That's fine. So what I want to do is I want to do this. I want to go into this. So I what is I equal to? 2 string copy to temp, which is now initialized, 100, full path, I, yeah, that's still good. Replace file extension, temp with the char, okay. That's fine. I is getting corrupted. Why am I corrupting the stack when I replace the file extension? Full path, there's no way that that's 100. Maybe there is a way. This is why fixed buffer sizes are a bad idea sometimes. So that's that. I wonder, is it? Maybe it is bigger than 100. Unrecognized token. Come on, man. What the hell is it? How big is this? There's no way that's 100 characters. Why did temp? Is there just a bug in? Is that really? Let's find out, because I'm tired and I don't feel like counting it or dealing with anything else other than just this code. So let's see. Let's see if my visual counting skills is off. Yeah, no, I'm right. It's not 100. So what is the deal? That is weird that I is getting corrupted. What's going on in here? So we got our name length. It's 55. And then we're counting down, right? So, oh, well, that's file name 55 is actually wrong. That should be -1. I mean, technically, it's not going to matter because it's not going to be period. It's going to be a null. So that shouldn't be an issue. So once we hit the first period character, we're going to break out. I isn't 0, so file name I is 0. And then we're doing a write to file name. I wonder if it is doing something crazy here. I'm wondering if there's some sort of behavior that's happening in debug mode where it is, after updating the extension, which is this part here, it's going to string concatenate, right? So basically I'm concatenating the .chr here. I'm wondering if it's going to add the 0 and then do something to this, and that's causing the and do it for max file folder name length rather than the length just up to the, I guess it would probably be doing that. So what well, let's see if this is what it's doing. That would, yeah, okay. Wow. All right. So, well, that's my fault for doing this in a stupid way, I guess. So basically what was happening, the reason it's corrupting the I variable is because the max file folder name length that I'm giving it is bigger than the buffer file name. Now, it's been a while since I've worked with these, so I was assuming, I wonder if it's because it's the string ncat version of it. You can look at it while I explain. So I was assuming that what it would do is it would just concatenate the string I wanted to add to the end of the string. And that was it. And the max file folder name thing was just a precautionary thing where it would not exceed that. But I'm thinking because it's the _s version that Microsoft has, it is overwriting all of the rest of the bytes so that you know that they shouldn't have data as kind of a secure thing. Let me see here. So what is the difference? These functions try to append the first D characters to string source to the end string destination where D is lesser count than this length. If appending those fits within, still leaving room for a null terminator, then those strings are appended. Starting in the original terminator null and a new terminator null is appended, otherwise the string destination is set. Okay, so otherwise it just basically creates an empty string. If count is truncate, then it will just do as much as it can. Overlapping strings are undefined. Invalid parameter handle is invoked. Of course, I'm not seeing. The debug versions of these functions first fill the buffer with FD. Okay. All right, so yeah, so I was right that that's what it's doing. All right, so let's do this. Let's have a parameter here so we can deal with this. I mean, that's probably the right way to do it because we're not always going to have fixed buffer size like we do in some of these. So or it's not always going to be the same buffer size, so it's probably better that we do this way anyway. It's just safer, and we won't have this problem anymore. So temp is max file folder name, and this is, it's overkill, but let's just use, this is the right way to do it anyway, to use a constant and then make that work the way it's going to be secure and or not secure but safer. I mean, it's to some extent it's a waste that it's emptying out all of the other stuff, but it does potentially catch things where you're trying to write a buffer that's bigger and stop that from breaking your code. Although it'll create other strange behaviors, as we saw, because you're now, only partially writing your string, or in the case of if you're not using _truncate, it'll zero out your string and make it empty. And those kinds of things I think are sometimes harder to detect because, crash, something has gone wrong definitively, right? But with those kinds of things, yes, I know they're more secure and, potentially stop things like buffer overrun exploits. But at the same time, when you're developing your application, it can be harder to deal with that and figure out what is causing your application to behave strangely. So I don't know. Just that's where we're at. That's why that was a problem. So we replaced that, and now excuse me, that's good. I is good too. And the reason that I was affected was because we're creating I here on the stack instead of, it pre-existing. So I'm kind of glad we found it when we did, because that would have been harder maybe to find later on. But it was just, anyway, hopefully you learned something from that. All right, so we've got that. We're going to load the metatile. We're going to do that export. and then we're going to write the ink bin, and then we're just going to keep doing that for all the metatiles, which there's only one. So now, if we go back to the asset tool, we have our blue tile character, we have our metatile file thing, metatile char thing. So that's included here. If we do a build that built successfully, and we should at least hopefully see in the char ROM, we do. So we see the 32 by 32 tile. The colors are obviously wrong, but that solid block of colors wasn't there before. And I expect that that's probably color 1. Yeah, so that's color 1, which is what it is in... well, that color is actually pretty close to what it's supposed to be. But yeah, so that's color 1 in the palette, which is what we want. So that's now exporting properly. And if we created another metatile that was a little bit more interesting, that would, I would assume, work just as well. So let's do that real quick. By interesting, I mean it's just going to be not a solid color. Come on. What are you doing? Just open a new file, please. Create new. So I don't know, maybe we'll do a little blue and red checkerboard or something. I think there's a fill for that, isn't there? We can do a gradient that's going to look terrible on the NES. Let's do that. So there's our gradient, and then we're going to do indexed color. And that looks lovely. Let's turn on some sort of dither so that it's a little bit better. Okay. Save that as gradient. Good. So we have our gradient. Where is that? There it is. So let's put that into the asset tool folder and fire that up again. We'll export that and see what that... What? Abort. Why? Why did it crash? Debug. That is not supposed to happen. At all? What is the deal? That's strange. Oh, is it too many? Okay. All right, so I know what happened. It's the number of list items triggered us to run out of child capacity. So when we allocate the child capacity, let's just make this bigger. It's not like we're hurting for RAM on this machine, or any modern PC, really. Oops. Child capacity equals default child count, which is 10. Let's just make it 50. There we go. So there's our gradient, and it loaded as expected. The palette, for some reason, did not, but that's fine. One thing I just realized is we're probably exceeding the number of colors. I don't see the warning coming up because I didn't break that down into 4 colors. So let's see. This image exceeds I assume this is happening, just we can't see it. Let's see. Yeah, so it's happening, but we can't see it because reasons. Where does that actually get rendered? That's not right at all. Wow, what happened? That wasn't broken a moment ago, but okay. So this is too many colors. We'll fix the, I'll go back and fix some of these weird UI rendering issues. So yeah, this is going to be too many colors. Although it's probably close. I just want to use something that we can sort of see a discernible pattern in the tiles. I should stop closing Photoshop so I don't have to keep waiting for it to open. All right, so let me see. How would I do this? So I want to maybe save for web as a GIF and make it a 4-color GIF, and then we can, let's see, colors, make it 4. And then we'll reopen it and save it as a PNG. Okay, so close that. No, open gradient.gif. What do you say? Do you say GIF or GIF? I don't know. I always said GIF, and feel like people don't like when you say it the other way. So now let's make sure we have the NES palette. Oh, that's gridded up. Grr. The problem with this is now all the colors are messed up. So let's go back to RGB color. We know it's still 4 colors, but we just gotta... This is the fun part of messing with this, is you gotta kind of like trick Photoshop into using the colors that you actually wanted it to use instead of the ones that it wants to use. Export PNG. Save. Yes, replace that, please. I will not close you because they may not be done. All right, so now we should be back to here. Replace it. Capitalize the G. And okay, are we still exceeding? I would like for that to actually show up. That would be nice. Oh, stop. Fine. Make this 0. Okay, we're not exceeding. It's weird that there's no colors in this, but create a metatile. Wow, what's going on with my palette here? For the sprites, it's okay. It was okay for this one, but for this guy, it is not happy. Okay, so what's the problem here? So when I have the image selected, that's doing create sprite. This is doing create metatile. It doesn't even have the right colors. Oh. Yeah, but it should still... So the problem is what? Is because of the color selected? That's so bizarre. That shouldn't be doing that. So here's our color count. And then we're just indexing through. Let's see. Yeah, we're just... Oh, I already passed the point where we're setting the bits for the color count. So we've shifted one off. That's the only color. What did it not save it as indexed again? I know I've had that problem before where for some reason I goofed and didn't save it as an indexed image. Yeah, damn it. Okay. And then export, quick PNG. That's probably something I need to add to the tool, is that if it detects it's not an indexed PNG, it warns you or something like that. All right. Let's go back to this, and it should work now. No? Why? Place. Why is it still... So the export... Oh, is it the... The export is... Exporting as indexed, and then I'm not saving the change, and it's reverting back, I guess. I don't know. Whatever, it's just being frustrating. I don't know why it would do that. It obviously didn't save it because we were getting the same result. There we go. Now we've actually got 4 colors. And we create a metatile from that. And we go here. It's a lot darker, but it is the 4 colors in a gradient pattern. So let's export this whole project. And we'll take the gradient char and metatile char. Well, in fact, we could just literally take everything that we have here instead of trying to be selective about it. Replace all that stuff. And then we have that, and we have this, and then we should take a look at... So this is the text file that we were generating for entities. So we have our for metatiles, so we have blue tile and our gradient. So if we reassemble that and go to FCEUX, which isn't open anymore. Shooter NES, where are you? If you look in the PPU, yeah, so that's definitely a gradient pattern. It's blinking because it's using the palette that's over here to start out with. If we cycle through, you can see it's a 4-color gradient pretty clearly. So that's cool. So that means that the export is working okay, and I think I'm good for now. Routson, I know who you are, and it is GIF, like gift, minus the T. I'm not a big fan of the alternate pronunciation. And you missed it before. I was showing the world builder tool. So we were looking at one of the maps that we created way back in 2004 as an example of how we're going to build this this map building application in the asset builder. Anyway, that's about all I can manage for tonight. It's we're getting on 2 hours here. Any questions before I wrap anything up? See a couple of people in the chat. Yeah, thousands of years ago. It certainly feels that way. All right, well, if nobody's got any questions, I'm going to wrap it here. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at Clairvis. You can comment on the video on YouTube. I'll be posting the recording shortly after we stop the stream. And I'm also in Nintendo Age in the Discord chat pretty frequently. So if you want to chat there, a bunch of people who are very knowledgeable about the NES and programming for the NES are on there and are very helpful. So if we're good, I'm going to call it a night, and I'll see you next time, Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. See ya.